Good morning and welcome to Career Launch Live. I am your host, Catherine McCord, and I am very excited to have this particular guest with me here today. She is a good friend of mine, and we're going to be discussing why bosses also need to follow the rules. So without any further ado, let's bring on the one, the only, Dawn West. What's
Hello.
up?
Hello, Catherine. Hello, everyone. This is a great subject we both love.
Yeah, it is. Because this is something that I think so many people just kind of skip over, right? Like the rules don't just apply to employees, they apply to bosses too.
They sure do.
Fact of life. But some bosses want to pretend that they don't apply to them. And we're going to talk about why that is.
I know more than a few.
More than a few. Yes, that's probably very accurate. So real quick, could you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Always an honor to be with you and hang out with you. I've been in HR for, 32 years, and I'm a syndicated radio talk host, a coach, an author, and more.
All right, very cool. And who's that in the background talking to us as well? We welcome
That
everyone.
is Ainsley, and I'm going to shut him up.
You're good. You're good. Little ones, they sometimes of all species just feel that they need to join the show, and we welcome that. So tell us. So we're talking today about bosses and why they need to follow the rules as well. And it's just I think that a lot of people, they get into leadership and they think I make the rules, they no longer apply to me. But the danger of that is that, yeah, right. Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah, absolutely, Katrina, 100%. And so you get that nonsense of, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm the boss. I can do whatever. I'm in a different plane. But leading from the front and setting the example is how you get everyone else to fall in line. So, and how you get everybody else to understand the value of your rules. So let's start with, what is the best mindset that people can have when it comes to, yes, we hear you, puppy dog.
Yes.
He has all the opinions about it.
I tried to get him to be quiet in the other room, and he's 5.5 months. He's a Cairn Terrier like Toto, and he is being naughty. So
he has all the opinions about life. So tell us real quick, what do you think is the best mindset, first of all, that leaders should have? And then we're going to talk about what happens when they don't.
Well, the best mindset that they can have is lead by example, because it's going to trickle down their behavior, whether they put up with nonsense, incivility, discrimination, not supporting neurodiverse people. It's all going to be watched. I mean, you're always on parade and you never know who's watching. So you have to have the mindset that you're really teaching the people that you're over, supervising how to act, Catherine.
Yes, 100%. And it's that, again, it's almost like being a parent, right? You have to show so that others can do.
Right.
And I think, but one of the biggest aspects that I want to discuss today is that it's an even bigger deal when leaders follow the rules than when other people don't. Number one, because it sets a precedent that it's okay to break the rules, right? But then also, there's a lot more dangerous implications for the team and the company as a whole when a leader does not follow the rules. So what are some examples of leaders not following rules where it just blew up that you have?
Oh, I can think of one.
Oh, I accidentally removed my. I'm so sorry. I accidentally removed you instead of me. So
oh,
keep talking. Tell us your example.
Yeah. Well, I remember working in the federal. Supervisors would take 1.5 to 2-hour lunches while we only had 30 minutes. And that caused so much dissension, distrust, I'll say unloyalty, because that's not really a word, but, and people talked about it and they were disgusted, and people started quitting, complaining. They would do what we'd call today, we didn't call it then, quiet quitting. They would do the bare minimum not to get fired. So we were not very productive. It was not a happy place to work. It was quite a miserable place to work. That was just one example.
And that's exactly, and the quiet quitting, when people talk about that, this is exactly what causes that. For people to just kind of go, okay, yeah, I'm going to just slowly look for another job. I'm going to just slowly do less and less and less because they don't feel motivated. They don't feel connected. I've had examples though, where it's just completely blown up and cost a company their existence. So I've seen leaders that caused lawsuits by being uninclusive, by being sexist, by being just nasty to employees, by, believe it or not, doing cocaine with their employees in the bathroom. That was a thing someone felt was appropriate. Believe it or not, that's a real thing that happened. And these are things that it's bad enough if they happen with an employee, right? But when a leader does it, it just completely breaks the culture. 100%. Tara goes, there's so many things that can happen that just blow up. So I want to talk about that, about the dangers of how it can cost a company. So in my mind, whenever people talk about leaders thinking that the rules don't apply to them, the very first thing I think about is the extreme of what can happen and what can blow up. And Katrina goes, I believe it. Yes, these are things that actually happen. And all the stories that we're going to tell here today are true, folks, and they're going to get kind of crazy. So I always think about those extremes, right? And another example of what happened when leadership didn't feel they had to follow the rules was there was a very large company that I used to work with, and they didn't feel like the laws and the ethics applied to them in general. And so they had this fun little thing that they would do where they would go around and they would set up shop in areas where there were very poor people and typically minorities. And they would set up in states that did not have payday law. And they would just intentionally not pay people for like a month at a time, even though the company policy was still to pay people on time no matter what. And even though there's all kinds of laws in place about this, the states didn't have payday law, so they felt they could get away with it. So they just would not pay people for extended periods of time, which caused homelessness in their employees and all kinds of other gross issues. So this can even cause systemic problems that trickle down to everybody. So what about, because I know you've done a lot of work around, companies that discriminate and things like that. So when it comes to not following inclusion and not being and not following the letter of the law when it comes to discrimination, what are some things that you've seen over the years?
Oh gosh, I've been mostly in the government, so a different experience in HR than you. And I think that complements us both. So some of the things that I saw, and this is what got me in the work I do today, is about 10 years ago was nepotism, illegal hiring of family and friends, which is illegal in the government. It was just prevalent and abusive, and also racial discrimination. I remember there being about 550 white folks, employees, and then I counted about 5 Black employees, and I'm thinking, my first start, I'm like, what the heck is going on here?
That doesn't seem like a very good ratio to me.
And that's what started the journey, me speaking up, and that's why I got, where I am at today, because, I wrote an article that sometimes people get upset over because they don't read the whole article, is why there's so many Black people in, public housing. It's because they can't get hired.
Yeah. It's
honest truth.
Or nonsense like what I just described at this other company, where it's like, oh, well, we know that you're already broke, so we're just going to also not pay you because that's super fun. Just not going to do it. And by the way, folks, most states do have some sort of payday law. There are only a few that do not. Thank you, Florida, that do not have it. So if that is happening to you, if your employer is late with your pay, do check into your legal resources and recourse. But there are still those states that are really far behind with this kind of stuff, and it can cause detriment. And this company I've given the example of is not the only one I've seen or heard of that kind of thing. This is something that companies just do sometimes. Like, oh, I'm just not going to pay my salespeople the commission that it's in their contract that I'm going to pay them, or oh, I'm just not going to do this. Like, what? And the same thing with hiring. And to your point, even something as big as the government sometimes will go, oh, we're just not going to pay attention to this. And then all of a sudden, everything's just very
Right.
tilted. So I want to hit on that too. So people, I hear a lot with hiring the excuse that, well, I'm not going to try to get minorities because that's discrimination against white people.
Mm-hmm.
So I always thought you shouldn't hire for tokenism. That helps no one. Okay,
Right.
don't hire someone just because they're a woman or LGBTQ or black or whatever it is. Don't do that. That's not what we're talking about here. But everyone should have equal opportunity. And if you're only interviewing white people, that should be a clue.
Yeah.
And by the way, folks, we're talking about a rule here. So it is you are not supposed to discriminate in hiring. This is federal law. Don't do it. And yet, all the time, every day, I see it. And I know you see it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? Do you think it's more not thinking about it, or do you think it's more active discrimination?
I think it's more active discrimination. And I have to say, I was looking at LinkedIn earlier this morning where somebody was talking about, how long litigation takes. And it got me thinking, because I knew we were going to have this chat, Catherine, is litigation, maybe somebody has legal grounds they've been discriminated against. Litigation can take a long, long time. It can take years. I mean, I've been in litigation for disability discrimination and retaliation. And, with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, it can take years to get, a formal hearing with the administrative judge. And they also, a lot of people are not aware, they triage it. So if you have severe retaliation, which I did, you get bumped to the top of the list. If you have less, retaliation, or your case is not deemed as, as strong as somebody else's that's been severely discriminated, retaliation, you go to the bottom. It's not uncommon to wait 4 years or more. And the employer knows that. And that's a good way to say, boom, you're out of here.
Yep.
And then guess what? They don't have money. They don't have resources. It's hard. Lawyers, I mean, they also have to make money too.
Yeah.
You can't be a lawyer. So I think a lot of
helpful.
it is active, the knowing. It probably is some unintentional too.
I agree with you. And I think a lot of times it's that knowing of, well, who's really going to do anything?
Mm-hmm.
And if the executive leadership, God forbid, backs this nonsense, you're really screwed. Because if it's one thing if the executives are the kind of people that will nip it in the bud when they find it, but most of the time that's not the case. And most of the time it's, well, I don't want this type of person working for me, and I can get away with that because I have this support. And even if they do try to sue, and these things are very hard to prove.
Yes, they are.
Very, very hard to prove, unless it is just like, unless you get like an email or something like that has something in it. It awful. And thank you for joining us, Miss Katrina.
Yes,
We
thank
adore
you,
you. So this is something that eats at me, is that a lot of times I'm with you. I think it's intentional. There's this mentality that a lot of people throw out of, oh, it's unintentional. People don't know. And sometimes that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you that my experience is that most of the time it is intentional to be gross. It is intentional to break the rules. Like, for instance, the person that was doing cocaine with their employees in the bathroom, they didn't accidentally do that. That was very intentional. The people, the managers I've known that broke the rules and dated their employees, which, by the way, oh God, you talk about an HR nightmare. Like, why? Like, one of you needs to quit if this needs to happen. Like, just quit. That's intentional. It is not accidental. When somebody is only giving projects to the men or to the white people or whatever it is that's happening, that's intentional. It is not accidental. And so I want to talk about stopping the excuses for this, and to stop saying, oh, it's okay, they just didn't know.
Well, we all have the obligation to know a bit of employment law. I mean, we may not be employment attorney, lawyers and such, but in HR, we have that, as they call, technical review, where we can look at the EEOC laws, and we know that it's, illegal to discriminate because somebody's pregnant or they have disabilities, or, for example, to deny them a reasonable accommodation because they're pregnant. Maybe they can't lift over 25
Right.
pounds.
Yeah.
We have that obligation. We can't just say no. I mean, it's like somebody recently trespassed on my property and they were like, well, we didn't know. And I'm like, well, you see, there's no sign and it looks like a driveway. It's like, you can't just say you don't know.
It's kind of obvious
You need
that
to
it's
get
my
off my
house.
property, please. And don't just say it's okay that you're going to walk through my property to get to the woods because, oh, you didn't know. We have an obligation to know or to find out.
And to use common sense. And to use
Common sense is
thinking
underrated.
sense. Common sense, I've learned, is not that common, tragically. Sometimes you're just like, why? Why is this what you're doing? Why is this what's happening? And I have learned I don't embrace the ignorance excuse anymore. Now, there are some things that I'm like, okay, how would you know this? There are some things that I will give some grace to, that I'm like, okay, I can see where you wouldn't have known this. But it should be obvious to pay your people. It should be obvious not to date your employees. It should be obvious not to racially discriminate or anything like that. It's very obvious. But even down to policies, I've seen managers that think, oh, well, this time off policy does not apply to me, or this policy about not using cuss words does not apply to me, or, oh, it doesn't apply to me to have my projects in on time. I'll just have my employees cover for me. And that is one of my biggest pet peeves. Is, oh, I don't want to follow the rules, so I'm going to make someone else do that, so to then cover up for me. Have you ever seen any examples of that in your line of work?
Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. Because the employee, if they're an at-will state, especially in the US, they could be fired for anything but discrimination. And people, let's face it. I mean, we could have 20 shows on insurance benefits, and people will stay with a job that sucks because they need the insurance for themselves, for their wife, for their children. And they put up with so much nonsense. And I think that's why it's important for people like yourself, that are getting out there and bringing awareness, education, empowerment to the people so they know what to do.
And there needs to be education. And one of the things that I've started really preaching a lot when I talk and speak, kind of to your point, is everybody educate yourself, at least to some level. Learn your payday law, learn your rights as an employee, learn what people can and cannot do. Because the other thing that happens on the flip side of that is that there's a lot of misnomers about what is and is not illegal. And so I'll have people contact me, I'm being discriminated against. And then you hear the case and you're going,
yeah,
not really. Like, that's not really discrimination. That's just you don't like your boss and how they're talking to you, which is also an issue, but it's not the same issue.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of, we also have to take responsibility to educate ourselves and to stand up to our bosses. So that's the other thing. So you have this boss who's like, it doesn't apply to me. Oh, it doesn't work for me. And they're not doing a good job of leading by example. But who's calling them out on that? And who's saying, yeah, wait, no, this doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And I have people go, well, I could lose my job.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say something here, and this is going to be a little controversial, but I'm just going to put it out there.
All right.
Here it goes. If you choose to put up with it, you no longer have the right to gripe.
Ooh. Oh, Catherine. Woo. Oh. This is like something Brene Brown would say, but it came from you. That's powerful.
If you choose to tolerate it and not say anything, you've lost the right to complain. You're done. You don't get to say, oh, woe is me. Oh, boo-hoo for me. If you make that choice, then that's your choice. You have to stand up for it. Now, and you can choose all different ways. You can go to HR anonymously about it. That's standing up. That's doing something. You can address it directly to the person. You can file complaints with government organizations, that kind of thing. But if you choose to let it slide, you've lost all right to complain because you're now compliant to this.
Well, I'm with you. I'm on the same page with you. I feel very strong about that.
Speak up.
Yeah, speak up. Absolutely. You can make a difference, a huge difference.
A huge difference. And I know it's scary when it's your boss. I've been in that situation. I do understand what that feels like. I've had to stand up to clients that paid me a lot, which are essentially, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. They're responsible for making sure I get money. And so standing up to them can be like, all right, well, I might cost myself some money here, but here we go. So you also have to find that internal line of what matters to me. Where's my priority? How high of a priority is dealing with this issue versus income versus advancement opportunities, that kind of thing. And that can be a very tough decision, but it is a decision that you have to make for yourself.
Yeah. And, can I jump in and say, there's a guy on LinkedIn, he's retired from the Air Force, like myself. His name is Dan Manning. He's a masterful storyteller. And he put out an article that just really, grabbed me. He said, don't nail your values on the wall. Show them.
Yes.
He said it a little bit different than I said it, but it's the same thing. And I wrote him, I'm like, yeah.
That's the thing.
And I had no idea. And he goes, Dawn, I was thinking of you when I wrote it. And I said, wow. I just thought it was all him. And I'm like, yeah, man, don't just, like leaders that have, leadership quotes underneath their signature block. Okay,
Yeah.
I have a problem with that because a lot of the people that I've seen that are not leaders. They don't act like leaders. You don't have to sit there and say how great you are, how you're into leadership. Show the action, show the reality, show how you really are being a leader.
Yes, exactly. And again, it's leading from the front. When you're a leader, you have accepted the responsibility of showing everyone else how to do it. That's just how it is. It doesn't matter if you're in the military, if you're in a hospital, if you're in a production environment, does not matter. You have chosen to lead and to show people how it's done right. So if you break down, why wouldn't other people break down and not follow the rules and that type of thing? Why wouldn't, I mean, I've never understood that line of thinking when managers that don't follow the law, don't follow the regulations, and don't follow the policies and procedures, and then they get upset because their team doesn't do it. I'm going, well, what did you expect?
Well, that's a good example. Yeah.
Why would they? You're being a pain. Like, you're not doing your job. You're being lazy. You're, not helping others. Why on God's green earth would they feel the need and the obligation to do that? And it's the same thing executives. I've seen executives that take all the time off, that just, blow money. They don't put money back into the company. They don't take care of their employees. And then they're like, well, why do people leave?
They act clueless, but they can't be that clueless. I mean, because they're sitting there taking time off, but yet, in the timekeeper, who the timekeepers keep in the time off schedule, they're not putting it on they're just taking it off because I'm in a position of power. I'm authoritative. I'm not a servant leadership. I'm going to do whatever the heck I want to.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why people turn you in for things. They quit. They give the bare minimum.
Yep. It doesn't work. And that's what I tell people. So you can get your team and your company into trouble by not following the rules when you're a leader. And you can break down your team dynamic. And what you're setting is an example of laziness and poor culture, and saying that this doesn't matter and this is a free for all. So it just causes systemic breakdown from whatever point this is happening, whether it's executive management or what have you. And it just breaks down the entire thing from just start to finish, which is, and people just completely miss that. But I've never seen an example of a poor leader where it didn't just trickle down, and sometimes even up, honestly, where it didn't just spread like a disease to the entire organization. It does.
It's predictable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's very predictable. And so I've had a lot of people go, well, what do I do? What do I do about this? If I have a leader that's not leading from the front, that's causing all of these issues. And I'm going to give another example too. So this was not that long ago. I had a leader in a company that was going around and making jokes to employees that were either sexual or racial in nature. And then couldn't figure out why the women and the minorities were leaving his team. Couldn't figure this out, was completely baffled. And it just threw me. I was like, how can you not see? So my question to you is, let's start with this. If you had been on the team, what would your response have been to deal with this issue? As a woman, if you heard sexual type jokes, or you heard anything that made you feel uncomfortable, what would you have done?
Well, you know me well enough, and some people know that I'm really a queen of documentation. I would be sending an email to that person, whether it was the top manager, coworker, whatever, and tell them, hey, you came into the office, you said, you don't have to spell out exact what they said, but they made inappropriate comments of a sexual content, and that's unacceptable. And see, the thing is, I'm an HR person, so I'm going to sit there and I'm going to quote the EEOC, and I'm going to give references and laws and United States codes and everything. That's just the nature of who I am and my background. I've been in HR a long time. And
but I want to hear on that. So educate yourself before you go in to talk about this. Educate yourself. Yes.
I tell them they need to stop it right now. If it doesn't, you'll take it, to a higher level. That's just me. And I know it's uncomfortable. Gosh, I've been in HR and knowing I'm in the right, and I have still felt fear. I've been asked years and years, didn't you get scared standing up for yourself? Yeah. You know what can happen. All kinds of ugly things. But if you don't stand up for yourself, then you're also not standing up for other people. And today we all need to come together as a community of like-minded people, so we have, safer and more civil work environments. I don't think it'll ever be a perfect work environment, but we can certainly make it better.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is standing up and having the community aspect, and remembering it's not just about you. If you're experiencing this, I guarantee you other people are. Yes. And from the company perspective, one thing I always remind clients of, and when I teach and speak, if one person's telling you, they represent a population. It is not just this one person. Understand that most people are afraid to come forward. Most people will not. So when you hear it, understand this is a systemic problem already in all likelihood. So it is very important to act on it with all sincerity and to take that step. And from the executive, if you're an executive and you know that this is happening in your company, here's my advice, and I want to see what your take is on this, Dawn.
Okay.
First of all, talk to them, provide a coaching opportunity. If it does not change very quickly, and I mean within a couple of weeks, fire them. Here's why. The longer it goes, the worse it gets, the more your company will break down, and the more danger your organization is in of lawsuit, of losing people, losing your brand, losing your customers. It is very important that it terminate the cancer, so to speak, right away. And I know people are like, oh, but you just love to fire people. I'm like, okay, only people that deserve it. I'm all for giving chances and educating and all this.
Yes.
But you can't be afraid to fire when you're an executive either. So what's your take? If you're an executive and you have this experience where leadership is breaking down, whether it's something really awful like racism or sexism or something like that, or even if it's just this person's just allowing a free-for-all and just not creating a good culture. What's your process for that?
Yeah, I'm a big picture person, Catherine. I look at the whole, how long have they worked there? Are they a team worker? How severe is the offense? If it's a chronic problem, they may need to be fired. And I'm not against firing people like that. They don't belong in the work environment. And I know when we onboard people that we do all this training, and then we're supposed to do it every year. Some people, do it more than every year. But I do believe that some people can benefit from consultations and coaching and things like that. I think it can make a huge difference. But I mean, we really are in positions of, we're in positions of power in HR, but we have to really look at the whole big picture. Is it going to cause a pandemic in the workplace, because this person
is so obnoxious. Pandemic in the workplace.
Yeah, pandemic in the workplace. I mean, get rid of them. And I have to say, let me add too that the difference too is when it comes to litigation, like the EEOC, it can, as you said, Catherine, it can shut down a company, in the private sector, in the public, like federal government. It really, it can be embarrassment to a federal government. But here's the thing, the money doesn't come out of necessarily a person's pocket. It comes out of the agency. So sometimes, people are like, well, I don't care, it's not going to come out of my pocket, and then they'll keep on with the obnoxiousness. And I wish we could change some of the laws where it didn't just come out of the federal agency, settlements and such, where there's really severe action taken. I say severe, appropriate action taken to the federal manager.
Severe and appropriate. Severe and appropriate.
Yes, because it's not fair. I mean, a civilian company can, one litigation shut them down, end them, and their name is in history.
Yeah, all for it. All for it. Hold the person responsible, but also the company that tolerated it. I do think that that's very important too. But I want to hit on something you said. So you talked about training. And I do think that part of the problem that we're seeing with a lot of leadership issues is that there's not enough training for leaders. People are being promoted into management, even executive positions, and they're not trained on how to be good at it. It's just like, oh, poof, here you go. Good luck. No. Being a manager is very difficult. Train people on that. Being an executive is a whole different skill set. And by the way, just because you're good at your job doesn't mean you're going to be good at management. And just because you're good at management does not mean that you're going to be a good executive. Those are very, very, very different skill sets. So it's important to not promote people just because they're good at their current job, but to promote the person that's actually going to be good at the next level, but then to support and train them.
Absolutely. Yeah, they definitely need mentoring. And I think just about everybody out there needs some kind of training, because we've been having, for years and years and years, we've had this authoritative leadership that is not working. And just look at our youngest generation that, they're not loyal to the company. They're loyal to themselves, but they're loyal to themselves for a good reason, because they don't want to put up with some of the crap that the older generations have been putting up with.
Yeah, and good for them. Good. I love that.
I commend them all. I do. Yeah, I commend anybody. Yeah, I don't care what age.
Yeah, no,
just stands up and said, this is nonsense.
Let's do the thing. Well, and it's like, the ageism thing is just idiotic, and I'm always preaching against that. And the idea that, people can't learn new things, or that, it just stop, just, interview based on the individual. But I digress. So, as we wrap up the show, so we've talked about, some of the ways to deal with it. So make sure that you're educated before you go in to deal with a manager who's not doing what they need to be doing. Make sure that you get allies, go to HR, go to different things, and on the leadership side, and sorry, my brain just kind of scattered there for a minute. On the leadership side, when you see this going on, deal with it immediate, make it quick, make it swift.
Yes.
But the last thing I want to talk about, because this is something that I've seen a lot, is when you go to HR, and I want to be very clear, there are HR professionals and the people that were put into HR that have no idea what they're doing and never bother to actually learn what they're doing. It's just like any other profession. There are people that don't know squat and are terrible at their jobs. So when you have a bad HR person, for instance, I dealt with one who, when I went to her and talked to her about a problem that I had well documented with a leader in their company, she said to me, and I quote, "I know him and he wouldn't discriminate. Obviously, this is just a misunderstanding."
Oh, Catherine, I've had a few of those myself.
Yeah. And this was well documented. Like, this wasn't even like, just take my word for it kind of a thing. I had documentation to back this up. And I'm just like, huh. And even if it had just been my word, dude, no, impartiality. That is your job, which I then lectured her on, which didn't really help my case. But it's, so when that happens, when you have a breakdown, I love this, just, yeah, that's not the appropriate response. So, I love it. Just, yeah, that's not it. I love that.
That is too funny.
So when that happens, when HR fails you, last bit of advice we're going to give today, what would you do?
Wow. I mean, I remember working in employee labor relations in the government, and it was a bad scenario where this employee was doing all kind of horrible things, grabbing women's personal, their private areas. And then it went up the chain, to remove him. And the person who was the interim director said, "Oh, he goes to church with me. He's such a great guy." And I'm like, uh, my thing is, keep on going. If you have to go above that person, keep on going, but document everything by email. I'm a queen about documenting. I mean, if I have a conversation with them on the phone in person, I still send a clarification email. Hey, for clarification purposes, yesterday we discussed, keep it brief. Am I correct? If something's different, please state so. And then print it out, take it home, never ever email it home, because watching. There is no such as BCC, that nobody can see, any IT person or somebody trained can see you send it home. You don't want everybody knowing.
I would do both. I will BCC. Now, this is just me. I do BCC myself, but then I also print things off, and I have nice, neat little folders, which did come in handy with that company I spoke about earlier that was doing very gross things. So it's very important to document and to keep climbing. But if you hit the executive level and you're still not getting satisfaction, this is my advice: leave and blow them up after that. Because you can go to government agencies, or at least go to the government agencies and let the government handle it for you. Because there are a lot of things that if you go to government agencies, they will step in. Like wage and hour will tear a company apart. Go to the EEOC site and complain. Go to the ADA site and complain. Let me tell you, no company wants that. That will rain hell.
And I'm glad you said that, because I like to say it's never weak for a person to leave a toxic work environment. Turn over all your documentation. I've had many clients, well, what should I do with all this? Turn it in. You're gone. You've left that place toxic. You might be helping somebody else. I mean, when somebody gets fired from a job or leaves a job, it impacts all of us.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're, like I said, even if you're not comfortable leaving, there are some recourses that you have with the government still. There are some options for anonymity. There's others where you can just kind of be protected, but that's very important. We do have one final question. Should a boss be comparing workers with each other? Okay, I'm going to give two answers to this. Number one, it's a natural thing to have happen in your brain. That's just a natural occurrence. Should they be sharing that? No. Should you be compared to somebody else in terms of work style? No. Should you be compared to somebody else in terms of, is it helpful to tell somebody, oh, you should be more like so-and-so? That's not really a helpful approach. But now if you're in a sales environment and they're saying, hey, this is our top rated sales guy, and they're doing like a sales ranking thing.
Yeah.
Fine. That's fine. I don't see a problem with that. But it's not helpful, because people all function differently, to expect people all to work the same. That's not helpful. And I would say that you could end up in some discrimination very easily.
True.
Yeah. Wouldn't you think so? I would think that would be.
Yeah. And everybody comes forward with different gifts. I mean, they may have the gift of conversation. They may be more technically inclined.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't really
be compared against what are the goals of the company, what are the expectations.
Yeah, that's okay. You more want to compare it to the expectations of the role than anything else. Comparing employees to each other can get discriminatory. It just can cause sour grapes. It's just not an effective way to do it. And with that, I want to thank everyone. We've gone way over, which is great. I love talking to you. Never a bad thing. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I will have Dawn back at some point. If you have further questions about things going on with your boss at your place of employment that are just not right, this lady right here, Dawn, will help you out. She is a genius with this kind of stuff. Really highly recommend a conversation with her. Connect on LinkedIn. Check out her show. It's really super cool. Episode is cool.
You are a genius too, especially with hiring and neurodiversity.
Thank you. But definitely connect to us both. Could definitely connect with Dawn. She's absolutely incredible human. And thank you all. Same time, same place next week.
All right.